Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Thought and Perspective. I have family doctor Scott Jensen here again today. Scott, I would love your thought and perspective on election integrity. Not conspiracy stuff. I don't want to go down that path because there's so much bitterness and anger from, it seems, one side of the fence, and then the other side of the fence says it doesn't exist. Neither side is probably accurate. But as a voter, that's really concerning to me to see that really what's going on with it.
Matt, thanks for asking that question. You and I have certainly both been exposed to that concept that if we don't use the lessons of history to shape the way we view something today, we put ourselves at risk of making the same mistakes that have been made previously. I remember Will Rogers said something like, good judgment comes from experience, and a lot of experience comes from bad judgment. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think I was paraphrasing. Let's just go back. Let's go back to 2000. What happened in 2000? We had one of the closest elections in history. We ended up having hanging chads. And it was in December that finally the Supreme Court made a decision that basically gave the electoral votes in Florida to President Bush. Mm-hmm. And in the month of December, Al Gore said that he did not agree with the outcome, but he conceded the election. Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg was upset, and she wrote for the minority that she dissented. Traditionally, the language would have been, I respectfully dissent, and she skipped the word respectfully. That was 2000. In 2004, we had another close election, and President Bush was reelected, but shouts and clamors of fraud in Ohio was the big one. Then in 2016, we had outcries of fraudulent elections when President Trump was elected.
From a foreign country.
And we had the Mueller report, never approved anything.
No. Couldn't.
So then let's go back to 2008. There was clamoring from the other side. 2012, there was clamoring from the other side. If I could inject just a note of humor, I guess we could go back to 1984 when President Reagan was reelected. I think the only state in the entire union that didn't vote for President Reagan, I believe, was Minnesota.
It was Minnesota. I remember that.
At least there was a clear-cut winner that year.
Yes.
And there wasn't too much clamoring about fraudulent elections.
Yes.
But I think the important thing is that there is a problem with our elections. This has been going on not just for decades, but literally hundreds of years, if you actually go back and read about American history and elections.
Yeah, sadly.
But let's just ask ourselves, are there shenanigans? Are there behaviors that compromise the necessary comfort level that Americans have regarding their elections? Mm-hmm. I think there are. What are they? Well, we know that harvesting ballots, impersonating individuals, dead people voting, illegal vouching for people that you don't know, absentee ballots. It doesn't stop.
Even in our state of Minnesota, there's been people caught on video of doing these things this election.
So then the question is, to what level does this rise to? Is it enough to overturn an election?
Right.
Well, perhaps not. But if an election is perhaps a few hundred votes or maybe only 40 or 50 votes, then you start to ask questions. Mm-hmm. But there's other problems that are deeper than that. Don't we undermine the desire on the part of an American citizen to vote if they believe that the elections are so tainted that it isn't a valid election anyway? Isn't that one of the really dastardly outcomes that could come if we don't do something about election integrity? I mean, to me, as a senator for 4 years and as now a citizen and a family doc, I ask myself the question, what's the priority? Is it to get as many ballots in the box as possible? Or is it to make certain that every ballot that gets in the box is an eligible, legitimate vote cast by an eligible, legitimate citizen of this country? Because it seems to me That's a critical question. I ask myself, if everywhere I go, I've got to show you a photo ID, whether it's to use my credit card or to get into the community center so that I can play basketball. If I have to show a photo ID, why can't I do that same thing to vote? And if someone says, well, I don't have a photo ID, then why doesn't the government say, we will get you one and we will pay for it? It's $3 to $5, but we might bolster the confidence that this country needs to have about its elections.
Confidence, that's actually, where do people lose confidence in the government? What's the first step? They lose confidence in the voting.
Yeah.
And if you lose confidence in the voting, what's the next step? It's losing confidence in the government. And when you lose confidence in the government, revolution?
There's no question when the bureaucrats and the politicians say, you should trust us. No, you have to earn that. The day I got my medical license, when I walked into the exam room to see a patient and they asked me a question, if I barked at them, you should trust me, that would be silly.
Yeah.
I have to earn that trust.
Yes.
And you're right. That's a slippery slope, that when the voting and the elections aren't something that muster confidence, government will be questioned, and it will grow. And at some point in time, people will ask, where did the trust go?
Yeah.
Then people will ask, where's the truth? And we'll find that that relationship between truth and trust has been so bastardized, we can't find ourselves out of it. We can't find our way.
Yeah, and then that's where that's a bad place to go.
So I think,
as a people,
I don't know why a Republican, a Democrat, a Libertarian, a Tea Party, an Independent, I don't care what party, why we wouldn't say that we need to do what we can to fairly, and be fair, but fairly bolster the integrity of our elections.
Absolutely, because wouldn't you want to win by fair means?
Well, actually, I'm not so sure. I think, honestly, in politics today, I'm not certain that winning by fair means is that important.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the trust pieces. I think there's a lot of everyday voters who do not believe that politicians are interested in fair outcomes.
Yeah.
I think many people would say politicians want the outcome to be that they win.
Absolutely. And I think, did you see AOC's video or heard about it?
I've seen several of them. I'm not sure I saw the
Recently,
one.
she came out with a video and said that, talked about her experience at the Capitol riot, and that she was afraid for her life and some of these things. And I won't discount her fear. The reality is no one was in her building. You know, they were just trying to make sure that people were safe. And so that kind of blew up, and people saw through that as, hey, look at me. This riot was about me. She came out and said that Ted Cruz literally tried to murder her. That's a pretty substantial claim to make, just because he was involved in saying that, hey, there's some election issues that we need to look at. People are starting to see that, though. They're starting to lose that trust in things like you're talking about. She is trying to do things and holler the loudest, in my opinion, so that the focus is on her and not on really what's true and what needs to be there for integrity purposes.
Yeah, I didn't see that video. I know that when I was in the Senate, there were a couple of times I had death threats. And my inclination was to, that wasn't really a death threat. That was just someone venting and being upset. In a couple situations, one where the sheriff called me, the sheriff has probably greater skill than I do in terms of assessing a death threat. So when the sheriff said, we need to make some changes in your routine, my wife and I took them seriously. And the same thing happened at the Capitol, where the sergeant at arms talked to me and said, we think that this is a legitimate death threat. But I think that we need to be careful to not use these things to elevate our importance in that. And I think that, I don't know, maybe it's not just politicians. Maybe it's the way our society is today. Sometimes it seems like we're constantly trying to elevate the situation where we're victimized.
Absolutely.
Whether we're victimized with, because it seems that being a victim plays well.
Yes.
It arouses sympathy and gets you press and all that. But I think we need to be careful about that. I understand that these things happen and it's difficult to sort out how serious something is or isn't. And I don't mean to denigrate anybody's experience. But I think that we're all seeing that. And I think the American public sees it as well.
Yeah.
So I think that I would say to myself and to politicians all over, be careful. Now, when you dramatize something and elevate something so that you're trying to evoke a certain response from the public, be careful. Thankfully, the public is fairly astute. And I'm grateful for that.
Absolutely. It's certainly in time they're astute. It might where that victimization might work for a short period of time, but it's not sustainable. So, Dr. Jensen, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.